everyone. Welcome to eLearnChat. We are back. This is the second show of being back. Actually, it's 186 maybe? It's either 185 or 186. So it's
186.
186. So this is going to be show 186. I'm joined by the lovely, the beautiful Ray Jimenez.
Okay,
and even more lovely and more beautiful,
I'll
Linda Joy.
You're talking about Linda.
Oh, Ray loves compliments. Come on, admit it. You do.
Yeah, my wife gives me enough, I think.
That's good. But Ray and I are good friends from not that far back, but 7 years already. I think it's way back almost in today's day and age. And I think I've known Linda almost as long.
Yes, it's been about 7 years.
About 7, 8 years. It's been time just flies in this world right now, especially with social media and all the things we do. It's amazing how fast time goes. But anyway, I think we're ready to start the show. So why don't we switch to Linda and my shot to start? And if everybody's ready, we're going to start the show in 3, 2, and 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome to eLearnChat, where talk, it's knowledge. I'm joined today by our co-host, the one, the only, Linda Joy. How are you, Linda?
I am doing great, Rick. Thanks.
Well, this is your second show, and the first show you thought went way too fast.
It did. I'm looking forward to today.
This will be fun.
Great guest.
All right, let's put our intro and let's get going. We're back. Sorry. I'm just looking around going da 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 da. That's the problem when we're not outputting the sound from our feed to us. It's a little harder to sometimes queue up. And the reason we don't do that is because of lag. It tends to slow the transmission by about 1 to 2 seconds sometimes. So we don't want to do that. It throws people off. But anyway, Linda, today we've got with us an old friend. You've just met him, but he's now your old friend too. And his name is Dr. Ray Jimenez. He is a wonderful educator and developer and designer and architect, and he's an evangelist of microlearning and scenario-based learning, vignettes, and just an all-around good guy. Ray, how are you today?
I am good, Rick. Thank you so much for the very nice words. And Linda, great meeting you. And I'm glad and congratulations. We're back.
We are. We've got a lot of emails throughout the last about a year and a half we've been gone to bring the show back, and a lot of people enjoyed it. So we decided let's try bringing it back and see. We did 184 shows originally.
I know.
And so we're adding more shows to it, and it should be fun. Some small format changes, but basically it should be a lot of fun. And we definitely wanted to get you back on. You're always up to something good and. What have you been up to recently?
Well, it's I'm a student of learning, so there's a lot of things going on, and to the far extreme, of course, Pokemon Go, right?
Yes.
How that impacts our lives. I mean, maybe I'll be dead when we begin to use it in learning and training, but that's phenomenal. And then the other extreme is, of course, just trying to reflect on how do we really make sure that we help our learners and our businesses, our companies design and learn training in the fastest possible way and the most fun way, if that's possible at all.
You see any new trends, anything happening?
Well, there's a lot of, the couple of major trends I'm seeing is, number one is what you call the stacking of software. When we started in social media many years ago, everybody's resisting using the highly independent tools,
right?
The highly independent social media tools, which are all freestanding, but they have been paving the way for change in behavior starting with Twitter, Facebook, and all other tools. Today, it's commonplace. I remember the old days with AOL. Remember the instant messaging?
Yep.
And everybody scared of instant messaging, and we can only do instant messaging in AOL. We could never allow it inside companies, right? So Lotus Notes was doing it for a long time. But these are what I call. What is interesting now is that it seems like there may be other opportunities where behavior change can happen, primarily because of the small applications.
Well, that's true. You've got tools like Microsoft bought Yammer for internal collaboration, and that's doing pretty well. And like you said, Lotus Notes is doing it. There's another one that Microsoft uses. I can't remember what it's called. Was it Messenger? So you've got a lot of different ways that people can communicate. Actually, it's funny you bring up the social media. At one point, and I'm changing my view on this, at one point I thought social media would be a good tool for change, for learning. And what I'm seeing today is that social media is a great tool for propaganda, censorship, and I go, ooh, that's not what it was meant for. and I'm really concerned about that. If you look at Facebook, it's quite onerous in the way it censors whatever it doesn't like. And what it doesn't like is whatever it feels like at that moment. And to me, that's not a healthy environment. Twitter, I think, has some built-in obsolescence, because the minute you have a lot of users, and I know, Ray, you have a lot of followers. I've got, I don't know how many you've got right now, but you have a lot more than I do. I think I'm at about 34 or 3,500. And you lose track of everybody. The more followers you have, the less you actually are able to engage with anyone. And so I find that, well, how is that good? You can get your message out to a lot of people, but do they hear it? Do they notice it? And if what we look at is, for example, how many retweets do you get on a show? And we used to get lots, and the more followers, it seems less.
Right. Yeah, it's well, those are very interesting observations, Rick. One of the things that, as I reflect with social media, I think social media is just one of the earlier tools, the enablers. And commercial entities, naturally, for economic reason, uses every tool that comes in handy to meet some financial gains, naturally. But when I look at these tools, social media, one of them, and other tools are very robust search engines.
Sure.
They somehow tells us, we as people, how we behave. And in fact, nobody trumpets it a lot because there's no commercial value to it. But for me, the single biggest contribution is that it gives us the possibility of understanding ourselves with the tool. And whether it is Twitter, imagine what Twitter can do. Imagine Facebook. Yeah. I am some of those very reclusive person. And I think that the American Psychological Association have already put me into a disease area, which means that if you are reclusive in the world of social media, you're actually sick. So I'm a little bit sick in that way.
I must be deathbound at this point.
I know, it's just jokingly, because I'm one of those guys who don't spend all my time in Twitter or Facebook. I look for intimate relationships.
Yeah.
And I use the social media to have intimate relationships when I meet up with them in the phone. But there's one thing that I realize the biggest value, at least for me, is that I use it to articulate some of my viewpoints, and from a, whether you call it propaganda or marketing, I use it for a validation point, because I blog almost every week. And what I discovered was that it helps me articulate myself, and it helps me reach out to people. Some actively comes back and tell me that my ideas are good or bad, but somehow it builds a reputation. So for that alone, for anybody who wants to build a reputation, or I think that anybody wants to help another person, there is such thing as a reputation as a byproduct, which we nurture over time, and we don't know how bad or good, because other people follow it faithfully. I don't. I sort of don't care really what people think of me, and that's probably a problem. But I think less of what they think of me. I think more of the value of articulation because I'm able to express myself what I sincerely believe. And that's my gift to the world. Now,
Yeah.
many people disagree with it. That's okay, because it's just my own small way of saying that this is how I understand the world. I don't need to convince everybody. So for that reason, this is a pattern that is happening now, but many people are stuck with the technology rather than understanding the opportunity and the behavior change that it presents to us, to me individually, and for the people who might be interested to listen to a couple of ideas.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a
I
good
can
point.
absolutely see you utilizing that, Ray, because you kind of really do specialize in giving little pointers, giving little highlights to how you go about, how you approach e-learning. And you very much seem to have refined that to bring your point across in little micro steps, in little micro ideas. And I could imagine that social media really, you get enough feedback to then put it together, as you say, in a blog or something like that.
Hmm. Yeah, the blog comes in when you go to conferences. Suddenly, you're surprised. Some people are calling your first name,
Hmm.
and then you get more selfies together, which is kind of an ego tripping, of course, right? But more importantly, there's an economic return. People tend to buy some of my books so I can pay for my car, right? And then pay gasoline for the next car. So, meaning to say, there's a kind of a traffic. I think the followers sort of reward us
Hmm.
by expressing their gesture that they're also following. There's
Yes.
one lady, if I may, there's one lady, I forgot their first name, but he has a blog called Brain Pickings. And it's a fascinating writing. Every week she writes incredible, to the point that I'm now willing to donate every week X amount of dollars to keep her going, because it's my own small way of saying to her thank you of how much she has affected my thought,
And
right?
what was it called? Brain
Brain Pickings.
pickings.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a very nice one. I should search for her right now, and maybe I can give you the name of the author. But she's only one blog that I really pay for. That's
See,
because
that's
I love the
exactly.
way
But
she
that's
writes.
exactly it. So you're getting a lot of value from that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And for that alone, you're happy. And the nice thing of what she's doing is that she believes so much in what she's doing, and she thought that she should get some returns from it. And indeed, why not, right? And I think that that's a good model for people who really spend time researching, thinking through what they're thinking. Well, this is my theory, Rick and Linda. It only takes one thought to impact another person.
Sure.
And if I have about 70 to 80,000 people in my list, if I only have a few of them smiling by the time they read my blog, and they change one sentence of how they write their content, that's it. For me, that's the value contribution.
You know, that goes back to another line that I've heard many, many times, and that's change happens one person at a time.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what you said in a different way. But it's true. You can't change everybody at once. Some people can, but it's rare that we can change that many. We may change a couple, 100, 50, 20,
Yeah.
3, 1, or you even get people to hate you. And that's a different thing. And that's also, in a way, sometimes interesting, unless they're crazy and they want to kill you. But that's
Yeah.
something else.
Yeah.
But literally, we can affect what people think about. You may not be able to change them, but you could actually make them reflect a little bit.
It doesn't have to be total change.
No.
I mean, just a shift in paradigm, just
Incremental. Yeah.
or an adding of a layer to what that person is already going about,
Yeah.
refining.
Exactly, and I think that so when I look at the new developments today, and it may not be new development, I think it's more like Rick and Linda, a way of looking at things. Technology will always be changing rapidly, and therefore, when you watch technology without the insight that indeed it impacts behavior, then people are only looking at the technology and the bells and the whistles and the shiny things.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't look at the technology in terms of how does it better relationships, how does it better
Mm-hmm.
communication? How does it better human quality of life, right? So that's how I look at this thing. For example, the Pokemon Go. I think this is going to be a real innovation. And again, I'm not one of those gung-ho guys, but the fact that this old company who has these assets have found a way to redistribute back the assets by getting people moving, acting it. And my daughter has a piggy bank of Pokemon in her dorm. She's now already in college. She's already working, but she's a Pokemon generation, right?
Yes.
So they understand the world differently. And I think that from a trainer, a designer, I'm excited because I'm a student. I'm observing how this thing fundamentally changes the way they do things.
Yes. A new way of being interactive.
Yeah.
And yet,
absolutely.
isn't it sort of like a variation on the old scavenger hunt?
Absolutely. There's not much of a difference.
Just electronic.
Yeah, the human intuition, the human curiosity is always there. I don't think it really changes for thousands of years, but the tools, I think it was Silly Brown, right? John Silly Brown, who says this, that we invent tools, and in tools invent us.
Yep.
Because it changes us. So that's the area of my observation. And give you a good example, like you follow this weight control, steps control, activity control, with a wrist the
Right,
wristwatch,
like the Fitbit or something
for
like
example,
that.
Yes.
Fitbit is one of them. If you observe it carefully, people monitor themselves by that tool, and they stand up in the middle of the meeting and says, "Why? Because my Fitbit tells me I should be standing around this time." It's a very interesting thing because we don't realize it, that we're actually changing behavior modification. We're changing our behaviors. We are welcoming the technology to affect the behavior. And the two good things is, number one, we recognize that the tool helps us. And number two, the tool can really deliver something, right? So this micro, which is again part of micro learning, micro changing of behavior, happens that way with a very micro tool. And what is very, very, very exciting is that there are billions of these little tools now. The only difference is that we have not really brought them in. There's no major investment in innovation into the learning world, so that we allow people to do many of these innovations and affect by simple apps. We are still in the large corporate funding
Sure.
environment, and it might take 10 years, but the opportunity is there.
You know, I used to have a weight scale years ago. This is a long time ago. That when you stood on it, if you were too big or heavy, it would go, ugh. It's like,
Only one person at a time,
oh
please.
my God, only one person at a time.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I was one of those where I got
I would like to quick mention something because we've had the screen up twice. Ray, you're putting on an online workshop, Storybased webinars, coming up in December. You just finished one.
Right.
And there's one coming up in December, the 5th and the 9th and the 12th.
Yep, I have 3 or 4 workshops that I love to do, and the byproduct of projects that I do is, we call it action research. You research them, you apply them, you test them, and then you keep on communicating them. The fundamental part of it is the same concept of interactive stories. There's a big difference between interactive stories from storytelling. Briefly, storytelling has been a one-to-many tool, because during the generation of storytelling, the only vehicle we have was for cave people to have the wall, and one experienced hunter would tell the story. Today, that has fundamentally changed. It's no longer telling a story, it's actually interacting with the story, because now everybody has the tools to send out a story and interact with a story. And this is phenomenal. So at the heart of the design process in this workshop, we talk about how do you make lessons more context-driven, because in the world of information overload, and in the world of do it now, get it over with, and do it fast generation, no one has the time to think through factual situation. They need to understand facts in the context of its value, and can that only be done by context or some form of a story that relates to it. So that's the bedrock of this workshop. It's been fun, very, very valuable. And today, probably about over 1,500 people have been attending it for the past 3 to 5 years. So it's been very rewarding, constantly refining. And then I applied that not only in e-learning, but I also applied Rick and Linda in terms of how do you deliver it in a webinar. So most webinars are like clicking pages, lecturing. How do you develop the same structure of having interactive stories in the webinar? So it's been fun as well. So thanks, Linda, for letting me talk about it briefly.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things about microlearning or vignettes or anything that's story-based, which I think some people overlook, and these are complaints I've seen in feedback from training and from other things, that unless there's some sort of human involvement, then it just becomes facts again. So I think, you know, when I've seen your vignettes and your microlearning, it tends to be people oriented. I mean, you're not skipping that part of it, whereas a lot of people skip and they just get to the fact. Here's the story, but the story is really just a kind of a cover for something else, and they miss the human part of it. Mm-hmm. And as a result, you get more pushback or unhappiness of people don't relate to it. It may be in context, but we're missing the emotional element.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah,
Another thing you've mentioned, I've heard you mention, Ray, is that interactivity is not activity. That there's a fine balance. I've heard you talk about the fine balance between keeping interactivity and not getting lost in just activity.
Yeah, and that's a kind of a prevalent problem. We have a lot of new trainers who come into the workforce every year. And to my surprise, when you take a quick survey, many of them have not gone into the understanding of what is a simple adult learning process. So what they do when they develop e-learning or webinars is they use the efficiency of the tools to quickly ram together the factual content, forgetting that effective learning always involves context to it, right? It is easier to put in a PowerPoint very quickly and present the PowerPoint because it was given by a subject matter expert, and most of the designers today are so far removed from the source of the content. They're just recipients of a PowerPoint, and then they turn it around and they have no other way, they have no questions in their mind. So I think what happens, therefore, is that when you're looking at interactivity, they are stuck with the idea that it has to be clicking of pages or something, but true interactivity is in the mind of the person. You, the three of us, can have a quality interaction without a tool, because it's in our minds, and therefore the power of questions, the power of an incident, the power of a real life are triggers that help us interact with the idea without even a tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Back to exactly what Rick was saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's true, but and it changes the shape. For example, when a designer comes in to develop an e-learning or even a classroom training program, we have been so efficient, literally efficient, in producing content. And the problem is that we have not gone back to the learners and really check how much of this are they really applying. So instead of having very bloated content, what we're suggesting or exploring is how are they producing this content so that they can identify the truly valuable content, not from an instructional point of view, but from a business point of view. Mm-hmm. Where are the errors, and how do you avoid and prevent the errors? Where's the biggest value, the return of the investment in the training time or the learning time? And what are contents that are oftentimes so difficult to learn that unless you develop something around it, the learner will not move ahead. So this is so different from the instructional design, typical instructional design, where you'd say learning objectives, cover this area, test this area. So it's like learning objective, deliver the presentation, memorization. Memorization, I mean, so it's a memorization thing because there's no context. So naturally, they want them to memorize the facts because there's no context. But in this approach, we're saying that if we need to help the learner to understand where is it valuable in real life, in real event, then they will remember the facts. They will even know where to find the facts, especially today when you can find anything, almost anything very quickly. So they just need to know what's the value of that and then be able to access other resources to complete the work.
Ray, one of the things that we run into all the time, and I've been advocating for years, that adults learn in short segments. They don't learn in huge 2-hour mega classes that just bore people.
Right.
And it's a very hard one to get through to a lot of business managers or operations managers. They're thinking, you got a half hour of floor time. I got to get them off the floor. I got to get them back into calls or whatever they're doing. And yet, what's the efficacy of that? How efficient is it to do 2 hours? I don't think it is. The short concept of micro-learning, of scenario learning, of vignettes, something short to the point, to me makes a lot more sense, and then can be broken into categories later on for better learning again, or refreshers.
Sure. Well, there's a huge momentum that we have. We are born out of our industrial system thinking, out of 500 to 1,000 years of industrial engineering, that we have to be efficient. We have to do steps 1 to 10.
Yeah.
Today, we're stuck with that 1 to 10. Our institutions gauge learning from 1 to 10. It's not gauged in terms of, I need to pick up 7 because 7 is the only thing that I need. And there's a tremendous momentum against it. The bigger hope, though, is that as organizations wrestle with the demand for faster, better learning, or even just newer way of learning, more and more training program has been now delegated to actually learners to learn. Why? Because our institution does not encourage them to learn by themselves. So people are going out learning it by themselves.
Right.
And eventually, over time, I'm not sure about this, it's just only a thought into my mind, we will still have a lot of training based on curriculum, but that's highly restricted for certification and compliance. But real learning is happening in the fingertips of the learner.
Yeah.
That's already happening today, in fact.
Yes. You've written 3 books, Ray, and 2 seem to, well, 3, what micro-learning goals lead to huge dollar returns, and also 3-minute e-learning. I mean, this is really your specialty. This is really something that you have developed and you've honed in on, and I'm sure have had a lot of success.
Well, you always test and document the concept. I made a case study over the past several years that if we focus on the most important content, let's say out of 100%, you only realize that what often is needed is only 20% for conversation purposes, right? When somebody goes into the job, they really don't use 100% knowledge. But they're lucky if they can use the 10%, 20%. Depends on the job, of course. So when you do that, you separate the 20% and you focus on 20%, suddenly you begin to realize that we are not treating content equally the same value. So we put higher value on the most important content. Therefore, we put our investment in multimedia, in authoring, in LMSs on the 20%, because that's exactly what we want them to learn. The 80% are PDF reading, HTML reading. They're just Word documents that they can search in the internet. The problem today is that everybody thinks of content 100% equally of value, so therefore our cost is so high. Because instead of just giving them a PDF, we're converting the PDF into a long slideshow. And because they just bought Articulate and Storyline, they now want to narrate the really boring slideshow. And then suddenly they said, it's still boring. Oh, let's add a multimedia into it. And then finally they said, you know what, it's still boring. Let's add a gamification into it. So meaning to say, a truly boring content, which was not separated from valuable and non-valuable, which can be learned later on, is a very expensive proposition. Let me give you a metaphor here. I was running this conference with a micro-learning. A consultant approached me and said, Ray, I like your idea, but can you stop talking about this micro-learning? I said, why is that? He says, because I am billing my client on the number of slides I develop with them.
Oh,
Right. So if what you're saying, Ray, that will cut my project down to 30%, because all the rest will be reading materials, because they're supposed to be searchable tool. But I said, okay, but this is exactly what we're talking about, right? Well, the good news is that I see more and more people realizing this. For example, a lot more, even the larger consulting companies that I've worked with have begun to realize that you can't dump data. Because, Rick, you've been in development, and Linda, when you put everything 100-page slideshow into a captivate or a storyline, it's not just the expense of putting it in. You have to watch them pixel by pixel by pixel. By the time you have 100 of those, you cannot correct it unless you carefully want the pixel by pixel. The cost is so high, it takes forever to do.
Right.
But if it's a PDF, but you can search the PDF. You can put it in your server and you can search it. So I've been testing this over and over and over and again, and it cuts the development cost down to 30%. Very unpopular, but it's down to 30%.
Also, it's not that you're also cutting the development costs down, you're spreading it out.
Yep.
So instead of having one huge piece, you may have 10 or 20 smaller pieces, which make more sense.
Right.
And then you can leverage those 10 or 20 pieces into other things. Well, you know what, Ray, in keeping with the whole concept of micro-learning and vignettes and everything else, we've actually come to the end of our show.
Okay, good.
We're trying to keep them down a half hour nowadays because people said they're too long. And but that's good, because then we get to invite you again more often.
Oh, I'd love to.
Yes,
and I'd like to congratulate you,
We've just
Rick
begun.
and Linda, for getting this going, because this is incredible. You only need to touch one soul at a time.
That's true.
Keep it going.
That's true. Well, anyway, Ray, as always, it's a good pleasure. We need to get together again for lunch. It's been a while since we've gotten together.
We have to, right?
I'll give you a call real soon and see if we can get together maybe in the next several weeks or so.
Very good.
If you're around, let's try to make that happen.
We will.
And I've never met Linda in person all these years.
Yeah, well, I'm going to send her an email, right, Linda? So.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Ray. This was intriguing.
Thank you so much. Have a good time.
You too.
Bye-bye.
And Linda, we'll see you next week. And for all you people watching, please subscribe and give us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And, Ray, if you're doing the talk in September, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Just send my email, which is Ray, VFT, R-A-Y, V as in Victor, F as in Frank, and T as in Tom, Ray VFT Jimenez. Or go to my website, which is vigneteslearning.com.
Okay, great. And there it is again. And that's good. So we will see you next time, Ray, and Linda. See you next week. And for all you people watching again, have a good one. Thanks for watching.
Have
Take care.
Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Be well.